All right, we're live. How's it going?
Good man.
Awesome. Are you
We're
drinking any coffee this morning?
no, nothing this morning. We're a little kerfluffled. We had a little bit of like a roommate party last night, so
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so one thing I wanted to talk about, you did a video recently where you're talking about your thoughts on politics and how a political system, how you think it'd be best. Um, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but like I'm putting together a book, and I've been doing this for about a year now. So I'm poorly putting together a book about the best ways to build a society from scratch. And so I thought it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on what you thought were like the most important things to building a society. So obviously, anything realistic that could affect us would be based on what we've already gone through and like what us in like the country we're in, like what the laws are. But I was just curious what your thoughts would be if there were no big societies. It was just like groups of 20 or 30 people living amongst each other, kind of like groups of chimpanzees, but it was just people living out in the wild. And then you realized that you thought it would be best for people to live in a society. So you're going to try to convince different like tribes of humans to come together and build a society. What would you think are like the most important things to do, like the laws that were needed, or the way a government would be set up, or anything like that? I know that's a lot to throw on
yeah,
somebody.
for sure, for sure. See what I'm trying to think of like what I would start with first. Well, so a couple of important things would be so I'd want something that's gonna grow um I guess like grow the economy, grow something that can like rapidly um like increase production, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I would be like a part of me is a capitalist, and that um it sort of incentivizes greed, which then like has actually good things and bad things to it, where people just more you know uh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then there comes an issue where it's like that kind of happens at the expense of the unlucky, and so
Mm.
then I do think you need like I'm a big fan of taxation. You need something like a progressive tax rate, um, and I- and I do want to like have some form of like market socialism in the workplace, kind of to protect that harm from occurring. Um, I don't know if that's sort of the best answer to your question, but
Oh,
um,
it's fine. I mean, it's something that most people just haven't thought about.
yeah,
And no, I think you make a good point. I think especially if it's just if it's before any society has been put together, there's not going to be too many inventions that exist, and getting a lot of people together and incentivizing um, w- um, with just having people competing against each other. Like if somebody makes the best canoe out of a tree, then then somebody else might make one and trade for stuff. But then this guy's all like, "Oh, mine's better, and I'll trade for less." And then eventually you get to the point of having money and having that instead of if everybody just shares everything, there's a chance that the best innovators might want to make a lot of things and share it. But if people are competing and you can live the best life, if you um, make the best things and you create new things, then I'm guessing a lot more will come out of that. Is
yeah,
that what you would think? Like we wouldn't have computers getting better and better and all these different things if it wasn't for the fact that part of doing that, I'm sure Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and all these guys, they have a passion for the things they make, but I don't know if passion would be enough to drive it. It would be knowing that you can live a good life and make a lot of money.
yeah. I think having money being the incentive, because not all things are like um, often incentive driven. I don't think a lot of people are gonna have like a hobby of fixing sewer lines or doing these nasty jobs without like a money incentive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it reminds me of I hear a lot of I believe they refer to themselves as anarcho-capital or no, yeah, anarcho-capitalists. Um, maybe it's not them. Anyway, some form of people that believe in anarchy. They want a future where all employees at a company like own the company, and it's not like somebody can just start their own company. It's like everybody owns it together. And the issue I see there is when it comes to companies, usually somebody is they save up a lot of money. They might even like sell their house or something, and they take this huge risk because they really want to start up this coffee shop or this whatever they're starting up. And if they pour all their money into it and they hope they can make this thing a thing and it works out, then they're the ones that take the risk. But if there's like if 10 people work for them, that if the company goes under, they just go find a new company to work for. It's a wild idea to me that everybody would just like share it equally, the person that like created it and then the people that just happen to work for them. Do you have thoughts on that type of structure?
Yeah. So it's the Vosh structure. Um,
Yeah. It's the first time I heard of it was Vosh was debating this guy named oh, I can't think of his name, but actual justice warrior, I think it was. Anyways, he was debating on this topic.
yeah, I heard about it through Vosh as well. He was on the Charisma on Command podcast years ago. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I actually don't think it's that. So like the typical relationship in a company seems actually pretty tyrannical, right? You have people at the top kind of just being dictators with people at the bottom. Um, and there's this sort of situation where um, the people at the top may offer some value, and they may even offer more value because of like the capital they put in, but they're like getting paid like thousands of times higher than all these workers that are adding this. I feel like the workers probably add a great deal of value, and they're not really compensated for it, and they have like
Mm-hmm.
um, zero say about what goes on in the company. So, well, I think democracy is good, and adding it to the workplaces would be good.
Mm-hmm.
We do run into an issue where if it's um, you essentially, if everybody owns the company, you essentially give the workers the means of production, which then gets rid of aspects of that incentive that grows the economy through capitalism. So I do want to find that balance where I think workers should own part of the company, but not it shouldn't be completely owned by the workers. So maybe you'd have like um, I don't know what the exact number would be like, but like I don't know, 20% or something is like owned by the
Mm-hmm.
workers, enough to where you could have like a meaningful seat on the board of directors and um, have like a meaningful say. Yeah.
Mm. Would so if let's say 10 people worked for one person and they were all on the board of directors, would that mean that the 10 people could decide they want the owner of the company out?
Uh, I think
Or do you mean
if
it
they
has to
possible
be
like
higher scale? Like this would only happen with big corporations?
yeah, that's something I've been thinking about. I might want to I think I lean on the side of like even for small companies that you'd probably want some worker representation.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think the idea of like only for like after above a certain like employee count that might be beneficial. Um, but
Yeah.
I do think the owner should have a like majority um ownership, but we should give at least some partial ownership to the workers. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and I could see something like that making sense maybe with with higher ups, or it might even just be easier when somebody reaches certain thresholds of millions that they're taxed more or something like that, and that therefore it goes to the rest of the economy. Um, but yeah, let's look at it at a small scale. So if you were convincing these tribes of people, so you, instead of living in a tribe of like 20 or 30 people, you were convincing maybe like 1,000 to come together and start this society. So you declared like what your borders were and that you all were living there together. If I grew a garden of carrots and they were just like I don't know, a lot of carrots, too many for me to be able to like harvest, and then somebody came by and I said like, hey, you know, you don't have to take this offer if you don't want to, but if you help me harvest all these carrots, then I will give you this like certain amount of money. And or I guess maybe at this point there wouldn't even be money, it would be some kind of a trade, but it could be the value that I'm going to get from the carrots that he digs up. I'm going to get, say, 100 units, but then the amount I give him for helping me dig it up is something like 3 units. Um, as long as like I'm not forcing him to do it, and he could just go somewhere else and start his own carrot garden, or he could find some other work. When it's something as simple as one person doing a thing and then offering somebody anything for the help, do you see any issue there, like where the government should obligate like me to give them a certain amount to help with the carrots?
Yeah, so there's this aspect of like you're not forcing him, but there is like a natural force to it,
Mm-hmm.
where um, if we live in a society that kind of requires these units, then you can't not pick the carrots. You know, whether it's at your carrot farm or at some other carrot farm. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the other aspect is that like um, this value that you're paying him is coming from him, right? He's sort of creating a large amount of the value by harvesting the carrots for you. So I do think that he should have a say. The government should step in and sort of protect his say within that company. Yeah.
Gotcha. I wonder how we measure it. How we measure. Okay, so if he helped, like say I dug up half the carrots and he dug up the other half, and the half and let's say I sold these carrots for an equivalent of like $5 per carrot or something like that, and and the amount I paid him was like this kind of small amount comparatively. But then say hypothetically, instead of that, what if instead of selling them for five, I sold them for 5 cents each? Like, would he deserve a certain value off of what he did, his labor, his how much pleasure the product he got up gave to others, or would it be based on the profit they brought? And that just popped into my head right now. I don't even know my own answer to that, but isn't that kind of interesting to think about? Like, you could say this person's job is worth this thing, but then would you also make the claim if the owner of the company decides to sell stuff for a lot less? Like, what if the owner of a big corporation like Starbucks or something decided, you know what, we don't even care about profits. We want to pay all the workers minimum wage, and we want people to have essentially as free of coffee as they can get. So we're only going to charge them enough to be able to pay all the workers minimum wage. Should should the company have to sell the coffee for more to be able to pay them more, or can they decide they essentially, I guess that would be like a nonprofit of sorts?
I mean, so I think if you want to sell your carrots for 5 cents, I think that would be fine. You would just have to include the workers in that decision. Like the workers would have to um, be part of that.
So if you're going to hire somebody to help with something, they should get say in what you do.
Yeah.
Interesting. Man, I personally can't get my mind around that being a thing that must happen. But I'm just so, my mindset is always towards freedom of doing what you want to do. And like if I was just
Well,
like wildly wealthy and the sun was beating down on me and I could just tell this person, I'm going to pay you to hold an umbrella over me. Um, I'd imagine I wouldn't have to involve them in that. I mean, that sounds like a wildly douchey example, but oh man, like
well, so do
yeah.
you? What are your like thoughts on just democracy in general? Do you think democracy brings freedom?
Um, uh, democracy. I mean, something like that. I'm not a fan of democracy. I don't think it is. I don't think it is likely the best approach. I don't think the whims of the majority should control anything. If right now if we took some things that we have in place in our government and just said, okay, everybody that's a citizen in the U.S. gets a vote, and that vote decides like whatever the majority is, this is what our laws are going to be, and then next year it happens to be that people think the opposite, and then it switches up. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I like the idea of. I think we have a pretty good system as far as you're in the U.S., right? Okay. As far as far as how we have senators set up, we have two federal senators per state, and then based on the population, we have members of the House, our representatives, and then we have a president that the president's job's kind of complicated, but if you break it down to how it was around the founding, essentially the citizens would vote for their representatives. The representatives would decide who the senators were, and then the senators would decide who the president is. So with the how it initially started was the only people that would vote on who the senators were, or sorry, who the president was the members of the House. And that's because it was almost like an honorary thing. It was like, okay, you have served us well, like George Washington being the first president. It didn't have any connection to do with what he would do to further the country. That's left up to legislation. Um, and so like I kind of actually wish we would go more back to that. I think the idea of people voting for president is just kind of silly, depending on what we view the job of the president. If the president is running the military, and the president is nominating people to the Supreme Court, then in my mind it makes sense that the that Congress would take care of that on their own. But I like the idea of us having representatives that we say, okay, we feel this way about this thing. We're going to hire, essentially hire. We're going to vote in this representative, and then them with all their knowledge. So essentially, long boring story short, what I think is that if there are people that usually go through law school, they become lawyers of sorts, and then they become politicians. They have all this knowledge of how to be a politician and how this stuff works. And in my mind, it makes sense that we can have a democracy in a sense that we all should share what we want, and then the people that know what they're doing should take care of that. The idea of mob rule just scares the crap out of me. That like one day everybody could say, okay, legally we should all be forced to be Christians or something, but then a couple years later it could be legally we're forced to not like hate speech is illegal, and it can just flip flop to whoever happens to be the majority at that point. So, anyways, I'll stop rambling, but that's kind of how I view democracy.
Gotcha. Yeah. So there's a lot of debate as far as like what counts as democracy. Like I would claim America as a democracy, but just because I would claim that a republic is a form of democracy. But
Mm-hmm.
um, I guess sort of like I guess sort of pushing that aside, I don't. So if within that system, right, where you have representatives and maybe you have some sort of rules that protect, you could have like a constitution or something that would protect um, employees or owners of companies from certain things. Why couldn't we have that in like the corporate world, right?
You could. I just don't know if people should be forced to, because you could have it in anything. I just think the individual choices. So like I don't think I should be told where I can walk or what I can say. So we don't need to have a democracy to tell me what I can say. So I also don't think we need to have a democracy to tell me what I can sell. Now, there is a difference. I think it might have been John Locke that was the first one to talk about this, that when it comes to resources, they're limited, where other freedoms, they don't involve limits. So if you have like a freedom to not be killed, a freedom to not be enslaved, you can have freedom of speech. You can say whatever you want. You can have freedom of action that doesn't harm others. And it seems like there's good reasons to have these rules where there's no limits to it. But even though it might be good to have property rights and to let people own property, like it'd be a bummer if like this book right here, if I own that, but then because there's no property rights of any kind, somebody could just say, no, I own that, and then they they take it from me. Now, at some point, there are limits because there are limited resources. We have what we have, and if everybody had it, so we do have to allocate resources in this way. But I view the idea of owning a company or like selling something to people, like if I weave baskets from some material in the forest or something, and then people like that and they say, oh, we're going to give you a bunch of carrots for your basket. And then I go, okay, like I'm willing to make this if you give me this many carrots, and then I trade it. I don't think there should necessarily be a democracy involving what I can make, as long as the resources and the property laws let me make it,
Well,
what I can make and how I can trade it to others.
yeah, the issue comes is that you're not the one making it, right? It's a collection of you and your employees, and it's a whole group of people. It's like essentially a
Yeah.
mini country, right?
Yeah, I guess I view it about the same. If I ask somebody to do something and they do it, like if they do it for whatever the reason. So if I ask somebody to do something and they do it for free, then that was for free. And if I ask them to do something for an amount I offer them of something, whether it's money or product, then they do it for that. The idea that there would be some other like debating involved, I guess I just can't picture what would make that come in. I could see it existing. I could see it being a thing where we say, well, with this is how we do this. But I don't necessarily think it's best. Um, yeah. Because the idea of hiring somebody to do something, like, what if it's something you could do, but it's just easier for you if they do it? But if you were going to pay them a certain amount to do it, but then because of this idea of a democracy, it's like, oh, well, they should be paid this much more because we did the math, and that's what we all think. Then it could be like, oh, okay, well, I don't need you then. I'm just going to do it myself, and it'll just take me longer to do it. It might be better for the individual that was going to be hired to do it for a smaller amount than they might think it's worth, but enough that they'd rather do it than not be hired.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I'm gonna disagree. Um, yeah, no, there definitely should be a say, I think. Are you like I feel like just because something would be voluntary does not mean it does exist without that it exists without force. There are sort of
Mm.
natural um uh like essences of forces that come into play. Um, just are just based off of luck, right? I'm thinking about like sticking on like the Vosh topic. I'm thinking of his like Coconut Island example. Are you
Yeah,
familiar with that? Yeah.
I am. Yeah, yeah.
Um, Yeah.
Well,
So
loosely. Can you remind me, and then maybe ask the coconut question he would ask?
yeah. So it's this example of like how there's like it's sort of about like positive rights versus negative rights and how there's like um, essences of force that come into play even with the voluntary actions. So it's like you could have two people on an island, like they're stranded on an island, the plane crashes or whatever, and one of them wakes up, just happens to wake up before the other guy does, and
Hmm.
on this coconut island, he gathers up all of the coconuts, so he has all the
Hmm.
resources. So then the next guy wakes up, he needs food, um, um, and the guy with all the coconuts says, "Hey, I'll give you one of these coconuts if you do like sexual favors for me or something."
Okay.
And so there is this voluntary action where it's like, okay, like he doesn't have to, he can just die, right? He doesn't have to choose to do the sexual favors for the coconut, but there is some aspect of force involved, even though the transaction is voluntary.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what I'd say. Anything without a society with laws and rules, there'd probably be a lot of force involved. Anybody can do whatever they want. They can go kill somebody. They can rape somebody. They can steal all the coconuts and make deals with them. Whatever we want to call it. Now we can refer to elements, some of these elements as immoral. Um, but I feel like they're almost kind of meaningless without a society because um, that's all it would be is somebody can look at that and say, okay, this action is immoral, and we'd have to break down why exactly because with survival of the fittest, I mean, as you know, like probably kill animals, kill chickens, or kill humans, whatever you got to do to survive. So depending on if this pile of coconuts is gonna be a survival situation. Now I know the question is set up in a way where that's not really factored in. It's just like is it force to offer this thing when there's no others around? Yeah, I would call it likely immoral if you have an abundance and you have the entirety of something, and then you probably got to share it. But I would think that what would fix this situation is if you had a society and the society said, like, the rules of what you can and can't do. And I'm trying to think. So I think that what would make somebody, if somebody was in a society and they could not have shelter, food, or water, and then therefore they were going to die, then they would rather live outside of the society. So they'd rather live where they could survival of the fittest, steal somebody else's food, steal this person's coconuts, and not have to worry about property laws. And then if they have to fight the person, they don't have to worry about physical violence laws. And so a good society would have to factor that in, and therefore that's why, even though I feel like I lean libertarian, I don't fully lean libertarian because I know that not everybody is dealt the same hand. And so I don't know to what limits, but I feel like if a society has people in the society, they have to keep them alive. They have to make them prefer to live in a society than to want to overthrow the society or want to go live in the forest or whatever. Um, so, so I don't know exactly what to say about the coconut situation, other than if we were in a society and let's say like the one that we're describing, and there's like 1,000 people there, but let's say the society doesn't have any property laws or anything yet, and so while everybody's sleeping, one of the 1,000 collects all the resources and just has it. Then I would think an important thing for the society to do to have like their initial laws in place would be something to do with like taxation. Even if it was product taxation, so let's say there's not even money left or anything, they'd have to say for this society to work, this government needs to have a certain amount of the resources to allocate how it's needed for survival. And then outside of survival, in my mind, I'm a complete libertarian. It would be just whatever gets figured out. If somebody figures out how to have the best company and make the most money, and figure everything out, I don't. It would take details like I think if somebody starts a company, I don't agree with the idea of there being like laws to make people feel better. Like you can't discriminate on who you hire based on race or gender or religion or any of that. Like I don't like the market's going to sort them out. If they say we won't hire gay people or we won't hire black people or something like that, I think that should be totally legal and fine. And then everybody will just boycott them and they'll lose. But I something like minimum wage, I don't think that's necessarily necessary. I think now describing how I described that everybody has to at least be able to survive and prefer to be in the society, you might have to create a minimum wage, because if there are 1,000 people and only 500 jobs, then there's going to be 500 people that like they can. It's not like go get a job hippie. It's there's half the people there's not enough jobs for. So the same thing would go for if there's a cost of living, and because of freedom, the person that owns a company can pay a certain amount that you can't survive on. If it makes the people rather have like a revolution and an uprising in their country, then you put a law in place like minimum wage. So I'm in favor of minimum wage to get everybody to a survival and maybe even slightly above survival level. But outside of that, I believe in complete freedom for individuals to do whatever they want, which is why I'm very much like pro-gay marriage. I'm pro-legalizing drugs. You do whatever you want as long as you're not harming anybody else, and that includes companies.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, so my end goal isn't freedom. I think it's a great tool, right? But in what I'm like attempting to sort of try and get across is that I think like um, employee ownership in a company has more freedom in it than non-ownership does. Um, I guess going back to the coconut example,
Mm-hmm.
a, a way in which like if we were trying to create a society to kind of restrict these coconut things from happening, we would want to have some sort of representation of the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'd want to and we've already sort of talked about some of the issues with like a direct like complete democracy, right? But you can have some form of democracy where you have representation. um you could have a republic or something like this. And there's something that we see, like we've seen this work pretty well as far as like countries go, um,
Mm-hmm.
to like kind of protect us from a lot of these like Coconut Island examples, but we don't see this playing out in companies. A lot of companies are like a legitimate example of Coconut Island, where you have like a couple of people at the top who own all the resources. Um, we live in a society where you have to work, um, and not everybody has the resources and the means like to start their own company, um, let alone if that company is actually going to take off and be successful, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in the same way that in a country, um, freedom is increased when you have representation and kind of some sort of ownership of the country, though that's a bad way to put it. um, I don't see why freedom wouldn't increase in the context of uh, companies as well.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? What if both guys land on the island and they're both awake at the same time, and one guy is just like maybe lazier and just sits, he grabs one coconut and he sits down, and then the other guy goes around and he's like playing it smart. He wants to get them all. He wants to either have them for himself for survival, or maybe he just wants to be smart in case there's other people on the island, and he wants to have something for trading value or something. But the other guy just is not set up to think that way and doesn't do it. How do you view that one?
Yeah, so I don't hold a lot of weight as far as like well, I don't put a lot of weight into um I'm trying to think of the word. So I basically view the world as just pretty much entirely luck based, right? So um the person that was more lazy, he wasn't like, he didn't choose like the brain chemistry that made him more lazy, right? Like he just happened, the person that had more umph to go out and find more coconuts, he didn't really, he didn't choose whether or not he was born with that umph, right? It's like if you kind
Mm-hmm.
of in the same way of like, if they both woke up at the same time and one of them only had one leg or something, um
Mm.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that I think that's a good point, and I agree to some extent. I mean, I think there is wiggle room, especially when it comes to like kids. I think there are people that how they are, if they were raised by different people, there would be different outcomes. I don't know exactly how that factors into most people's view on free will, but I think usually it's thought of as there's a difference between kids and free will and adults. But anyways, I guess that's a whole different topic. But yeah, no, I agree. Well, okay, let's pause where we're at here on this, and let's go back to something else real quick. Um, I think because work type stuff, whether we're talking about money being involved or not, starting companies and all that, is kind of a little further along the lines. Like, let's say you were just starting off, you were talking to these 1,000 people and trying to convince them of this thing. What would you say should be put in place as far as laws go? Do you think a top priority should be having a prison of sorts and having law enforcement or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you should definitely have some sort of uh, group that's going to enforce the laws, or else the laws don't really exist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so definitely you should have like a police and military. Yeah.
Okay, what do you think? And I'm curious to see now. So I don't call myself a consequentialist or a deontologist, and I see so much overlap with the two. I think they're interesting to read about and talk about. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how those should affect laws. I don't know if you think that the laws we currently have are fine when it comes to consequentialism, but what would you say are some of the first most important laws that would have to go in place?
Um, Not sure. I mean, definitely some sort of like representation would, you'd want some sort of laws about, yeah, representation. Um,
What about like outside of government, like just what people can and can't do? Like, would you say that it's good to have a law just saying people can't kill each other?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think generally like, yeah, laws like that would be.
Okay. And then would you say that um, that utilitarianism should affect anything like the examples where kind of like the trolley car example where you kill one to save five? Would you want the law enforcement in a society that you thought was a perfect society to not act upon a utilitarian idea, like if they could kill one person to save five, that even though you think it would be a more moral outcome, do you think it's important to have a rule that your government is focused on not killing you and trying to protect you?
Gotcha. Yeah. So, um, I think, yeah, I think laws will generally bring about better consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like, yeah, like a law against yeah, like laws against murdering and things like this, like I think are overall good. Just because the main reason would be like, um not everybody like thinks about ethics and nobody you'd have a lot of people with good intentions giving bad consequences. But so having
Hmm.
sort of general legal legal rights and laws, I think would probably be good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so there's a lot of cases where laws come in that are they're kind of set up intentionally as a consequentialist idea. Like, for example, if there's a car wreck and two people come in from this car wreck, and one of them's like covered in swastika tattoos, and the other one is, I don't know, we can just know that they are a person that donates blood all the time. So you got a really good person and probably a really bad person. I believe it's set up that no matter what, even if you don't like that they have swastika tattoos or whatever the worst thing could be, if that person is closer to dying, that's who they focus on first. And I think it's good to have these laws that don't discriminate. Same thing with like if there's a burning building. In my mind, there are different ages of people that I would save first, and there's different like you could break down different ideas of who would be best to save if you knew intelligence levels and all these different things. But in a society, it's probably best to have the consequentialist idea of a firefighter grabs the first person, takes them out, or the one that's least likely to be able to help themselves, which is similar to the doctor helping a neo-Nazi. So I think that kind of thing is good. But where it doesn't seem to be a consequentialist idea would be if somebody like the hostage situation I was talking to Jeremy about, and maybe I was talking to Matthew about. Um, if there's a situation, or actually, I think what I figured out the better one was if there was a fire with five people in the building and there was a helicopter that had a big thing full of water. That I think they actually use something like this, so the hypothetical is not too far off. But a big thing full of water that could put out the fire and save all five people. And let's say that we have a high likelihood of knowing that all five will be saved, but one of the people in the helicopter that's doing this operation gets attached to the thing of water. And so they have to either abort the mission and all five people burn up, or they have to drop the water with this person attached to it, and they have to intentionally drop it, killing this person. Do you think it's important to have a rule that you don't sacrifice somebody for another, even if it's a better utilitarian outcome?
So we talked about this, at least in about the morality of it, in our
Hmm.
first talk.
Oh, did we? Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, from a moral sense, like the obvious answer is to attach the person, right? Kill one and save five.
Mm-hmm.
Um, league. Yeah, I'm trying to think about like league because I know if we could set up some sort of legal system where that would be allowed, and like I think that would be good. My issue is just that like um I'm trying to think of like the practicality of it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah,
Yeah, or like if somebody is like holding a hostage and they have a gun to their head, and there's like 1,000 people in this building, but they're also attached to a bomb, and they know if they try to shoot the guy, and if they miss and hit the person that he's holding hostage, then all they have to do after that is hit him, and then the bomb can't go off, so they don't have to risk like 1,000 people blowing up. Like in my mind, it makes sense to have a setup where you just know that there are certain risks you don't take. You don't shoot that close to an innocent person. You don't shoot a person to save other. You don't shoot an innocent person to save a higher number of innocent people. That seems to be the current setup in our society. Now, individuals can't do this, but also the law enforcement themselves can't do this. I think this is important. If I knew that it was built into the law that if a person was attached to this water that's going to be dropped on a burning building, that you could do it because they're going to save five, or let's say it's 1,000. You're going to kill that one person to save a full 1,000. I would want out of that society so quick.
yeah, that seems kind of crazy to me. Like I definitely want to. I think I'd want a society where you could do that. Um,
Interesting.
Yeah. My issue is just like thinking of how that would work practically. I guess one way I could see it working sort of practically is like I am a fan of the death penalty. Um,
Hmm.
so um, you know, in some ways that's you're killing one person to save future people. From the harm of you have some serial killer that's killing 20 people a week or something, and then you give them the death penalty. You're saving. Um, so in a way, that's killing one person. I guess he wouldn't be an innocent person, right? But
Mm-hmm.
um, well, in some ways, he would be an innocent person as far as like if he's just born with bad brain chemistry or something.
Yeah.
But uh,
Well,
yeah, that's kind of
real quick, I do want to comment on that. I don't think it's the same as the killing the innocent people, but I've always been anti-death penalty, and then I like kind of challenged myself to a level where I realized if it was a situation like Batman and the Joker, where it's like, okay, we put him in Arkham, but he escapes and he's going to go do this thing. Batman should totally kill Joker. He's a bad person for not doing it, but that's only because it's ongoing and he can break out. Same thing with you watch Western movies. Some guy kills a bunch of innocent people. He gets put in the jails, and then his posse comes and attaches ropes to the side of the small cement jail, and then the horses like pull the wall down, and then they break their guy out. Yeah, in these cases where you can't keep somebody in jail, you should totally kill somebody that you're pretty darn sure is a murderer. But in a society where you can keep people in and like, okay, we can house this person, they're kept in here, just for the sake of argument and figuring out where the morals are. Let's say the resources don't matter and money doesn't matter in any way. Let's say that we're in a place where it like the taxes aren't affecting people to keep somebody in jail for life, and the food doesn't matter. Would you still say that it's reasonable, especially knowing that the person didn't choose to be born like that, to not just keep the person in jail for life?
well, I definitely think death is gonna be more humane than life in prison.
What if you gave them the option? I'm okay with assisted suicide for somebody that has life in prison.
Yeah, so I think that would be the baseline is that you would have an option, but I think eventually there's a threshold that would be crossed where they shouldn't have the option. Um,
What would that threshold be?
uh, I think um,
Or maybe what's the
it,
furthest extent of it? Don't even worry about the threshold. Are you saying if somebody killed like 2,000 people, they should and it was caught on camera and they confess and it's 100% and there's no way we're locking up an innocent person or killing an innocent person, would that be like what you mean when you say threshold?
yeah, so like um, looking at like the foreseeable so like there's like a lot of crime in like within prisons as well, right? So it's um like a potential like possibility would be like if put them in prison and they're going to cause suffering towards like their inmates or um
Mm.
the community within the prison. So it's like, well, so the first sort of thing you'd have to try is rehabilitation. I think
Mm-hmm.
rehabilitation would work with a lot of people, not everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
and then after if that doesn't work, then you probably give them the option of like um, life in prison. Um, if it if it's like if it's foreseeable that they have like like a decent like fine life in prison, like they wouldn't be causing um, like extreme amounts of suffering within the prison. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you could maybe give them the option of assisted suicide, but if it's like uh, yeah, if it seems like there's potential like future problems that would still occur, then yeah, death penalty.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it's complicated. I always hear about cases where somebody's in jail for life and then they'll attack a guard. I think I heard of this case where a guard lost an eye because of like a stabbing with a pencil or something.
Yeah.
And I would much rather, like, if I could know that thing in advance, I'd much rather a violent person be put down than an innocent person risking their lives being, getting hurt like that. Um, so yeah, it's pretty complicated.
And I always think of the person I always think of is like Charles Manson, where
Mm.
with in prison, he was like still he was like people were writing to him, and he was like creating fans and stuff. You know,
Oh,
I could
yikes.
see like a potential like future Manson family arising. I mean, they didn't, but in some ways they did. Um,
Hmm. Who do you
yeah,
think is maybe the worst human that's ever lived?
the worst human that's ever. Um,
Should we just go with
I,
Hitler for this example?
sure, yeah,
Okay. I'm just curious. I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, but I'm just curious. I think I know the answer as well. But like Hitler, like a minute before his death, if you could press a button and just have him get all the pleasure in the world for a full minute, would you press this button and give him pleasure?
yeah, absolutely. I think I would. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course, I would too. I figured I knew your answer. I just your average person obviously wouldn't, or at least they wouldn't wouldn't have thought about the thought experiment. But yeah, sorry, I think I cut you off. You were going to say something about it.
mm, yeah, I mean, it's just like pleasure is good. Whether you're a bad person or not. Yeah, I think it's good for
Yeah,
good sake. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like I'm not a fan of like when I view jail or death penalty or any of that. None of it's based on punishment for your actions. It for me. It's the main thing is deterring people from doing it, and then also putting somebody somewhere where at least for whatever time they're there, they can't continue to do it. If somebody punches somebody in the face and gets like a, I don't know how much trouble you get in a week in jail. Um, I like to think that the week in jail will be a week that they're not punching somebody in the face, a week that they can go, oh man, I don't want to come back here again, so I'm going to learn from this and not do it again. And then knowing that that punishment is there, will anybody that hasn't done it won't do it. But the idea of you did this bad thing to me or my loved one, so I want you to suffer.
Yeah.
I don't get that.
Yeah, that's silly. There's one of my all-time favorite quotes is from Wayne Dyer, where he says there are no justified resentments. Um, and he gives this in this in his talk, he's like uh he says like it's not the snake bite that the snake bite um is like if you get bit by a snake, um the bite is like the thing that happened. So you were punched in the face, or you were raped, or you were, you know, and then the resentment of the person that caused that suffering is the venom that's then runs through you. Um, so it's like you were already harmed. Why do you harm yourself again by like resenting this person? Um,
Yeah.
you're kind of allowing them to hurt you even further, and that's kind of what happens when you yeah, punishment for punishment's sake. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me of the Stoic philosophers talking about like if you have no control over something, then let it go, let it go as soon as you can. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, okay. So okay, we sidetracked a little bit to prisons, but let's go back real quick to the idea of killing an innocent person to save more. I don't think this is currently acceptable in the U.S. in any circumstances. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a situation where, like, the government just had to decide, okay, one to save 100,000 or something like that. They probably wouldn't admit it though. But in your perfect society, so not just knowing this is more moral or not, like just as far as the law goes, how yeah, let's try to figure out a good practical way to do it where you would find it acceptable to kill somebody to save more.
Um, one thing that's kind of popping into mind is like military action. Um,
Mm,
yeah, like going to war. If you're going to war, you know that some innocent people are going to die. But oftentimes
mhm.
the war is justified for like a greater cause.
That's true, but that's not killing your own. That it's letting your own like citizens in a society decide they're going to sacrifice themselves or they're going to risk their own lives. But like for example, if somebody actually I don't know, prison's compli or not prison, war is complicated, and I don't know how people would do this, but if one of if the soldier for, let's say, a U.S. soldier had like TNT or something, they had some kind of bomb thing on their person. They were going to take it somewhere and drop it off and set up some blowing up a bridge thing or something. But it was on them, and they were in an area where there was like thousands of soldiers on the other side. I don't think it should be in law, and I don't think it would be, where the US, like a US sniper person could go, "Oh, this is a strange opportunity where we can shoot the bomb on our guy. He'll die, but we'll take out 1,000 people, and this will save, I don't know, the 1,000 it takes out. It makes it so they can save 1,000 of their own that are in a prisoner of war camp that those thousands are holding. I don't know. But you don't kill your own like innocent people, even in a situation where it has a better outcome. I don't think it should be legal in war, and I don't think it should be legal um, in your society just amongst each other.
But I think it seems like there's times in war, and I mean, this is we're assuming that this is like a justified war, right? Like a lot of the wars that we're in aren't good wars, right?
Yeah,
But
we can just assume that
um,
yeah, it's justified.
yeah, there's gonna be times where um, you're gonna set off a bomb, or you're gonna and it's gonna harm the like innocent bystanders within the country.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mostly just meant the idea of like our law enforcement, our military, our citizens killing innocents of our own. The whatever we risk. So maybe we should step outside of war, because war is a complicated, separate thing. It's even like I think people should. I think it's best to have it where if somebody doesn't want to go to war, they don't have to. But I'm sure that back during like the Revolutionary War and a few other cases, if people weren't legally forced by their government to go to war, then we would not have as good of lives that we currently have. So yeah, let's step outside of war for a sec. Um, yeah, I'm just wondering, like, is the downside of knowing that you could be innocently killed, like if a hostage situation happened where somebody was going to kill 100 people, and they said, if you kill the closest innocent person to you, I'll let these 100 go. And let's say that it's kind of Minority Report style, where we can the cops could like look and go, okay, yeah, this is accurate. If we kill this one, they're going to let him go. It's not going to be a thing where we'll kill this innocent person and then he'll laugh at us and say we're not going to let him go. Um, like, is there ever going to be a case where like it wouldn't be a huge issue that you could go, oh, I could be one of those innocent people. Anytime I see a police officer, I'm going to run away because they might kill me as an innocent person.
I definitely lean towards killing the innocent person. But I do there is the issue that Matthew brought up, where it's like um, you're incentivizing negotiating with hostage situations, may
Hmm.
increase hostage situations. But I think I lean towards uh, that you probably should kill the innocent person. Yeah.
Oh man, that the police officer should be legally allowed to do it. Like it's part of
Yeah, assuming I mean
their
assuming
routine.
assuming the yeah, it's in a minority situation, and they can they know that the person's not lying, or yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Whew. Man, that's rough for me. Yeah, because my thoughts when I first was started putting together this book and these ideas, I don't know if I'll actually put a book out, but it was just based on the idea that I view starting a society the reason to start a society is protection. Out in the wild, you can be killed by anybody. You can kill anybody. There's no laws. I don't believe there's any like natural rights. And so starting a society is just to know that there's going to be a government that says there is this building we call a prison. There's law enforcement of some kind, and you can't kill people. If you kill people, then you go to this prison. And same would go for the government and law enforcement. No matter who you are in this society, nobody can kill anybody. And so the idea that the government would kill an innocent person to save more people, it's just like such a bummer idea to me, because I feel like there are set things that are just, they should exist, and they should exist to the fullest extent. And one of them is that. But I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I would. I don't think physical violence should exist. Like, I think it should be illegal to physically harm somebody. But if you had to, if law enforcement had to physically harm an innocent person a little bit to prevent something else, I might be in favor of that, I guess. So I guess it's not the most hard and fast rule, but it's something like that.
Yeah, so it reminds me of like sort of a lot of my issues with the non-aggression principle, where like oftentimes causing harm actually sort of reduces harm in the long run. I think like taxation is a perfect example of that. Like, it seems like if I want to be like a hardcore like non-aggression principle person, it seems like it would be wrong. Like, if you just harmed a gabajillionaire, like with some huge trillionaire, if you just harmed them by like 3% by taxing them, but then it like ended poverty for eternity, like, is that wrong simply just because you're causing harm onto the that 2% harm onto the rich person? I think that's a little bit silly. So sort of within that context, yeah, I think harming somebody, having a rule against like not causing harm when like natural harms exist, and if by causing harm you can reduce a lot of those natural harms, yeah, I don't know if that ramble.
No, it makes
sense.
sense. I have a handful of thoughts on taxation, but in general, I'm in favor of it. I don't think of it as theft, especially if you're in a society that has taxation and you participate in that society, then it's not theft. It's part of the plan. It's not like maybe we'll tax you and then you go get the job and then you're taxed. It's like so I'm in favor of taxing. I don't think of it as theft. I don't think of it as I don't connect it with the non-aggression principle. I know that most people do, so I see why it is brought up. But with the physical harm, it's tricky because in my mind, like, especially if you separate the idea of like what the police can do. If you just have citizens, you have 1,000 people in this area. Now, obviously, back in the day, it'd be harder to solve crimes. But let's just say that you have 1,000 people, but also you have the capability of there's security cameras everywhere capturing everything on video. And let's say you have like DNA testing. So anybody could track if anybody did anything. I think anything that takes away somebody's freedom, like killing somebody, being violent with somebody of any kind, just like punching somebody, stabbing somebody. It doesn't matter if it's to a strong degree or a small degree. Even touching somebody. If you put your hand on somebody's shoulder just because that's what you do, kind of how French people will like kiss each other on the cheek when they just meet them. If somebody puts their hand on their shoulder, it's like as soon as they're aware, if somebody says like, don't touch me, and they step away and then the person touches their shoulder again, I think it should be illegal to touch your shoulder. I don't think anybody should touch anybody, harm anybody, anything like that. Nobody should force anybody into an area. So you can't enslave somebody. You can't say like, okay, you're going to live here and you're going to, because you did this thing. And what I'm claiming you have to do now is you have to be my slave or whatever. So nobody can force anybody into an area. Nobody can touch anybody. And I think for the most part that should cross over to everybody. So the government, how the government works. Now it gets kind of complicated because when somebody does something wrong and they're in prison, in a sense, they're kind of like a slave. But that's complicated. But yeah, I don't, when it comes to like non-aggression, like you don't aggress on others. I can't think of any case where I think it should be let slide. Like I saw something the other day where, somebody said some horrible thing to a person and then the person spit on them. And like, I don't know what your stance is on like free speech, but I don't think it should be as simple as people can decide, I do this physical action because I feel like it's deemed worthy here.
Yeah. So repeat that last.
Yeah, like
I'm confused about the spitting and the free speech thing.
yeah. Oh, I was just saying, like, do you think they're? I'm just wondering, like, so in my mind, like, you don't touch anybody all the way up to you don't kill anybody. Like, everybody has their freedom to be left alone, to have their and so if like, do you think that there would be some level where if somebody was like insulting somebody's parents or somebody's religion or whatever, like there's any level of talk that would make it, like if somebody called somebody the N-word or whatever, like does the punch back or whatever, let's just say it's a hard punch to the face, there's like blood from the lip or whatever, is there anything that can be said that can make that action acceptable?
How would we justify
Like legally acceptable?
legally? Oh yeah.
Like in my mind, somebody could be the worst, most racist person ever, call somebody the N-word, whatever, and if the person that they are being horrible to punches them, the puncher goes to jail, gets a fine, whatever. The other person we can just all, as a collection of people, ignore and not be friends with and whatever. But when it comes to legal action, I would say that there's no justification to violence as a reaction to words. And I was just kind of curious where you stood on that.
Yeah, I actually don't know where I stand on it. For a long time, I was a free speech absolutist, but I don't know where I stand anymore. I know like this new like Supreme Court ruling with like the website the gay website. Like I think that aligns with free speech, but it feels wrong, right? So it's like it's one of those areas where it's like, how should there be limits to free speech? Yeah, that's. But so I don't know where I would stand on it, but that's just sort of like something I've been thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that they made a decision on that. I remember hearing about that a while back. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, they basically said that they the Christian could deny the making the website, yeah, designing the website.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think I have pretty relaxed ideas on all that kind of stuff as it is. Like, I don't think any company should be legally forced to make cakes or participate in weddings or any of that kind of stuff. I think my stance on that, I don't know exactly where a cutoff would be, but I listened to Sam Harris talk about the topic, and I basically agree with him that when something gets so bad that a large amount of people are negatively affected in a society, you might have to step in and put a law against freedoms like that. And his example was in the 60s, when you in the South, you'd have a lot of restaurants that would say whites only and stuff like that. If it's so widespread that tons of states and statewide, like this kind of horrible thing is happening, you might have to put a law in place and say, okay, you can't discriminate based on race until the situation's fixed up. And then same thing where like you might need to give scholarships to certain races to try to remedy a situation. But once it's remedied in a sense that it's not happening to a large amount of people, then I think everything should revert back to freedoms. So for the most part, if a religious cake company that won't make a cake for a gay wedding says they won't, I think they should be perfectly legally allowed to. And it's not going to be some huge thing that's going to affect a huge amount of people. It's just going to make all gay people and pro-gay people boycott that place. Like I'd totally share a link to that place and say, hey, these people won't make a cake for people because they're gay. Don't go there. But I wouldn't want the government to step in and say, like, you're closed down, you get this fine, that kind of thing. So same thing would go for that website.
There was this back in 2016, they had the libertarian debate, and I think it was Austin Peterson that asked Gary Johnson, like, because they were talking about the whole gay wedding cake situation, and he's like, should a Jew be forced to bake a cake for a Nazi wedding? And a lot of people heard that question, and they're like, oh, well, Austin's comparing Nazis to gay people, how like this? But that's not the point of the question. The point of the question was that like by having laws that like will force companies to make cakes for groups, that you open that up, so just that reminded me of that. And I do see that as an issue. So I think what you were describing with Sam Harris, because I haven't heard Sam Harris talk about this, but I think I'll probably agree with that stance. Yeah, eventually you'd want some sort of law in place if the threshold gets big enough.
Yeah, like if it's leading to a lot of violence and stuff like that. But yeah, with speech, I can't. There has to be some kind of cutoff with like harassment laws, because even though I think you should be able to say anything you want, you shouldn't, even if you're in a public area, like you're downtown by a bunch of stores, or if you're at a park or something, you shouldn't just be able to follow somebody being like a foot behind them and yelling horrible slurs at them, but like following them. I think it has to be some kind of a distance thing, where if you follow somebody, then you can get a restraining order, and then it's not about your words. It's about how close you are to them, and that you're directing language towards them or noise towards them. But as far as words that can be said or written, I've just gotten to the point where I don't think there's anything that should be illegal to say. There is some topic that gets brought up when it comes to free speech, is that there's a handful of things, like you can't yell fire in a building that's not really burning down, where there's a bunch of people that could like run and trample each other. But even that, I don't know if that should be illegal. I really think that person should just get banned from the premises or something like that. Because
I don't. Actually, I don't even know if it is illegal. I think that's just something that people throw out. It's just the thing people say.
Yeah, it might be. It might be. I think when it comes, like, the most important thing I think humans can do is have conversations. And I think that's what leads to building a society and then creating the rules and whatnot. So being able to use whatever words you want to use is just so important. And
Yeah.
having individuals, like certain ones, decide, oh, this shouldn't be okay here, this shouldn't be okay there, then you just start having limits, and then you wonder, okay, when a different person is in charge, they're going to choose the different things that are illegal to say or do, um and it's not good. um yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
go for it.
definitely pro conversation. I think like one of my biggest pet peeves is on Twitter. Even within like the vegan community, actually, there's a lot of blocking going around. You know, if someone gets slightly
Mm.
irritated or slightly annoyed, you know, they'll
Oh, really?
block somebody. Yeah. I actually got. I mean, not. It um, wasn't a huge kerfuffle, but uh, a couple days ago, I got in a little like, um, so me and Avi, Dr. Avi,
Hmm.
I was like, what did I say? But it was basically on that thing of just like, yeah, of like blocking people for silly reasons. And I think Dr. Avi, and Ask Yourself, they burn a lot of bridges. Um,
Mm.
just
Yeah,
the amount of people.
I think I heard you talking about somebody. Who was it? Was it Debug Your Brain or no, 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 it's George from Carnism Debunked. Him and Avi are having some issues.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's something about I guess it originated something with uh predator calling. Um,
Mm.
and now there's like a lot of drama behind it. I'm not entirely
Oh,
sure what's going on, but it's
that's
like
funny.
it seems like silly drama. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and a
I
lot of
don't
it
do
would
the
be
Twitter thing. So.
kind of taken care of if you just like didn't weren't a diva and didn't like block people all the time. And yeah, but it was funny
Yeah.
because like trying there was like this big thread about what was going on, and I couldn't see um I couldn't really understand what was going on because there's so many like um tweets I couldn't see because they blocked me, or like because they
Hmm.
yeah, so it's like, oh gosh, yeah, I think that's a big
Yeah.
basically don't block people, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bummer. And social media, where everything is, for the most part, is typed up, that there's just so many ways that things can go wrong. I really wish that all people just had conversations like this, voice to voice.
Yeah.
You're less likely to just type angry stuff. Like when you're actually talking to somebody, you have to be a decent human, and so I try to stay away from Twitter. I do a little bit of Facebook, but I prefer just conversations with people and whatnot. But oh, real quick, since we were talking about free speech, somebody in the comments here or in the chat wrote, the greatest thing about America is that Larry Flynt wore an American flag as a diaper in front of the Supreme Court and won his case regarding freedom of expression and speech. I love that this person wrote this because I don't know how old I was. So I'm 37 now. Maybe around 1999, when I would have been 14, I think I watched the movie The People versus Larry Flynt for the first time. And that was the first time I started being interested in politics. And it was, have you seen that movie, The People versus Larry Flynt? Larry Flynt's the creator of Hustler. It's like the trashy version of Playboy. And so he had a magazine that just had wildly inappropriate stuff. And anyways, there was some big thing where, obviously, as you can see here, it went to the Supreme Court, and it was just the first time that I just like developed this strong feeling of freedom and people being able to do what they want to do as long as they're not hurting others, and free speech. And anyways, great movie, worth watching. Um, okay, do you have enough time for one more topic?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, because I do got to hop off here in about 15 minutes. I do want us both to ponder this idea that we had talked about before the free speech about what should be legally acceptable for police officers to do as far as killing an innocent person to save more. It seems like a thing that we might both have to take some time to think about. What realistically it would look like. But I want to hear anything you come up with for that. Because, I mean, obviously, if there's something that goes against my stances that would change my mind, I would love to hear it. So that's something you should ponder just for when we talk next time. But the last topic I want to bring up actually is abortion. And I'm trying to decide what route we should go because I heard you talk about it recently, and you were saying that you align a bit with Peter Singer, even up to the 6 months after birth, as far as the moral side of things go. Um, what do you think? Let's go legally first, and then we can jump into the morals. So legally, how do you feel about abortion?
Um, yeah, my current stance legally would just be regulations at 12 weeks, and then um, cut off including rape at 20 weeks.
Okay, 12-week sentience, 20-week viability.
It would both be sentient. So I just think at 12 weeks there's like I think there's evidence where like there's a possibility of sentience, but even if
Mm-hmm.
that sentience is there, it probably isn't like strong enough to have it. It'd be have a full cutoff of It's early enough to where uh I think the woman would still have a lot of weight, like as far as like her choice of like foreseeable like utility goes. But also at the same time, some sentience is starting to emerge. Um, but I do think it can be debated whether or not it's actually sentient at 12 weeks. But
Gotcha.
I think at 20 weeks it's like pretty set in stone that the baby can like feel pain and
Okay.
yeah.
Would you say that even though you care about the sentience and not just the fact that it's a living human, would you say that a human becomes a human around or not sentience, around conception?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
could call it a human life pretty early on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and not just like I like to distinguish between the difference between something that's like alive and of the human species, like my skin cells or my blood cells. Those individually, you can say that they're living and they're human. But as far as a human, like you're a human, I'm a human. A fetus that's about to be born is a human, but you would say something around the stage of like where a sperm on its own is not a human, an egg on its own is not a human, but conception is like the first stage of a human's life.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, I'd say so.
So I don't know. I feel medium strong. I don't know. I feel torn on if a living member of a species that will develop sentience, if there's value before the sentience is there. I lean towards that there is. But I do want to be convinced otherwise because I know a lot of people that I agree with on a lot of things that they don't put value on it until that sentience arrives. Would you feel the same way if we were in a society where where women didn't get pregnant anymore, so uh, there's no middleman there, and men and women just brought their sperm and egg to a facility that incubated the babies. The babies were incubated and brought to, and so if somebody brought their egg and sperm and then like a week later or 2 weeks later before sentience, they just said, we changed our mind. We don't want this baby anymore. If there's not a woman that has to we have to think about bodily autonomy or anything like that. If she's not there, would you say that that baby should just that zygote or embryo should just legally it would just grow to term, and then when they pull it out of the incubator, they just put it up for adoption? Or do you think it'd be better to terminate because it hasn't reached sentience?
I think it would. So I'll preface that like if I'm right again, like I'm not an antinatalist, and I so like if you have a if you have the means to give a good life to a child, I think you ought to have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but kind of putting that aside, I actually do think it would, in most cases, it would be moral to, um, yeah, kill the fetus in
Okay.
that lab. Um,
What if that specific
the
fetus, there was a couple that wanted a baby and they wanted it specifically when that baby would be born, and they would want that baby and they would give it the best life, but the the owners of the sperm and egg that initially wanted that baby to exist, before that baby reached sentience, they decided they do not want it to exist, the baby with their DNA, in the world anymore.
Yeah, I feel like if there's like if there's like a family lined up that's like most likely going to give them a net well-being life, then um yeah, maybe they shouldn't be allowed to kill it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I don't need to come up with my hypothetical to challenge you then, because we agree on that.
What would be the hypothetical, just out of curiosity?
So I know some people that think, before sentience, the human life does not matter whatsoever in any case, including a case like this where there's going to be a separate human that wants it. And so my hypothetical was going to be, because usually when people make this stance, they say they care about a species, a member of a species, once it reaches sentience, and if it will continue to have sentience. So that caveat is to, say if you're in a coma and you lose your sentience, if they are likely to come out of the coma and have their sentience back, then they're still valued because they once had sentience and they will continue to have sentience. So my challenge would be, well, what if somebody is in a coma and we can know for a fact that, so right now they're in a coma, they don't have sentience, and we can know for a fact that when they come out of their coma, in a few months or whatever, that they will not have one thing remaining of their sentience. They won't have any memory. They won't have they'll have to relearn language. They'll basically be like an adult baby, and the people that know the person will recognize their face or whatever, but there's no value to them. Let's like anything that you would describe as sentience is essentially gone, and they're going to be like born again. Like, if you knew in 3 months this person that's like 30 years old is going to be perfectly fine, like, if they just wanted to, kill this person because they didn't have sentience yet, would it be okay to do?
Wait, so they're in a coma, and then when they wake up from the coma, they're like essentially a baby that has to like regain.
Yeah, it's a 30-year-old that like will just like be mumbling noises. They have zero memory. No, they have no experiences. They haven't perceived anything, any sensations or whatever. It's all brand new to them, as if they're like a baby. And they're going to have to learn to speak and all that kind of stuff. So while they're in the coma for the 3 months, there is zero sentience. So it'd be kind of like a zygote or whatever that hasn't reached sentience yet. And once it comes to, it hasn't regained any of its previous sentience. Anything that we can describe as sentience, feeling, perceiving, any of these things, from its 30 years of life, none of that's still there. And so that's kind of my challenge to somebody that thinks that the life of conception through 12 weeks, doesn't matter till sentience, is I would want to know what the trait is, that makes that person valuable to save.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, definitely. The issue I would have is just that like you would need to have a foreseeable like someone to take care of them, right? I think like
Mm-hmm.
if the like say if like the family of the 30-year old, um I think if they wanted to um end their life when they're in the coma, um just because they don't have like they don't have the energy or like I think like utility would decrease if
Let's
trying
say
to like
this.
take care of the.
Let's say they were in a plane. Every friend and family member was in this plane, and everybody else
Yeah.
died. So nobody in life knows this person at all. But they're 30, and let's say that we know that there are tons of people that are perfectly willing to take care of this person. It's not going to put anybody out, and the person will learn how to speak English in a few months or something, and they can just go on to have a great life. but essentially at this point, while they're in this coma, I see it perfectly analogous to a an embryo that hasn't reached sentience yet.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, definitely if it's assumed that, they'll have a good life. Um, I think that's just kind of the main thing. Um,
Yeah. So your
yeah.
stances on abortion pretty much just come down to your same stances on life in general, which is the utilitarian stance that make as many people as you can as long as there's a likelihood they will have a good life. Like
Yeah.
you don't have a stance like um, like whether it comes to like bodily autonomy or
Yeah, no.
stage of life or any of that kind of stuff. It's
Well,
just
so
the outcome.
well, I do think it is. Some part aspects of it are complicated, right? So it's like bodily autonomy does sort of matter as far as like, um, but yeah, yeah, it does come down. It just comes down to outcome, yeah, consequences, right? So it's like if right, the mother is like really poor and there isn't um someone lined up to take care of the kid, right? And she can abort the fetus, and then like because of that, she can now go to college and then actually set her life up for future well-being. That's probably that would be good. So I think
Okay.
it is like a case by case sort of a situation, but it does come down to just consequences for me. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now for this last couple minutes, this is going to be where you might scare some people, but it's okay. Say your honest thoughts, because I heard you say the thing about morally, there would be cases where aborting up to 6 months after birth is fine, and um, so let's say we have that same situation. Okay, so a mother gives birth, she has a baby, she takes it home, she's very stressed, she doesn't like the situation, um, and so she wants this 3 month old baby aborted so she can go to college and get a better life, better outcome, and this stuff. Um, so how do you view that? Do you think it would be reasonable for her to like for our society to allow a 3 month old to be terminated?
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons that I have legally at 20 weeks.
Mm.
So I see a lot of situations where it would be ethical to abort a 6 month um, old baby. Um, I see that if we have that as like a law, I see that getting misused quite often. Um,
Mm.
yeah. So what I think of as far as 6 months goes, and what it's like, imagine you discovered they have some sickness that you didn't know about in the womb. Like you discovered that they have some severe disability. Then I think
Mm.
and like if the foreseeable future of the child would have a net negative life, yeah, I think the parent should be able to abort it or like euthanize it. Um, but it might get dicey with like actual in a law sense. Yeah.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay, well let's separate that because if how you view it comes down to outcomes, I don't know if you have much knowledge on adoption agencies or foster care. From some people, I hear that lots of people want to adopt, and there's people always looking for babies. But from other people, I hear that almost everywhere, but especially here, um, that foster agencies are pretty horrible, and most people that are put up for adoption are going to have bad lives. So, assuming that there's a likelihood of bad lives, let's say only 1% of people in foster care and adoption agencies have really good lives. Would you say that if somebody was trying to vote it in right now to law, to if somebody like let's say they wanted to put a law in place where if somebody wants to put their baby up for adoption, they can, but if somebody wants to abort their already born baby that's like 3 months old, they want this to be a legal choice of the mother. Like they don't want to feel they can't take care of their baby and they want to go to college and they can't afford the baby and all this stuff, but they also don't want to feel that their bloodline is out in the world where they're just going to be thinking about it all the time, and that they're going to have to like meet up with their child when they're older. Do you feel like the baby is not developed enough or has enough consciousness or anything like that 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 mother should be able to make that choice legally? Like, would you vote for it?
Yeah, I mean, so um, yeah, so we're making, yeah, the short answer is yes.
Okay,
And that, yeah, it's gonna scare some people, but
that's all right.
there is some assumptions that we're
You
making
also
and
we
that,
also both said that we would give Hitler a minute's worth of full pleasure before his death. So,
yeah,
so some things are going to be hard for people to wrap around their mind. So, yeah, go on.
yeah. There's a couple of assumptions that we're making that kind of help that decision. It's that like the adoption, you're if adopted, they're likely to suffer, and
Mm,
um, if they're if they're born or like continue, not, I guess they're already born, but if they can, like, if they're not aborted, the parents are likely to suffer.
mhm.
Yeah, so I think within that, yeah, I think I'd vote for it.
Gotcha. Would there
I
be a
would also
certain
like to
cutoff?
say, well, I'd also like to say that you'd want you'd want to create a society where that wouldn't be so, like, you'd want to create adoption agencies that aren't like that like majority would be happy in. You'd want
Mm,
to you want a society where that option or that scenario isn't going to happen, but if it,
okay.
yeah, if it were to happen, then yeah.
Okay, so in a world where the adoption agencies are great, there's people that want babies like crazy. You would say that the argument that the mother and let's say the father as well, they both don't want their bloodline to exist. Like one thing I've heard people say is so the R word that we can't say. If there's a baby that comes from that, um, so people will say like put it up for adoption, and then somebody will say like they wouldn't want to know that something that's part of them, that they are the mother side of what led to this person existing, but they wouldn't want to see this baby that looks like the person that sexually assaulted them. But they also wouldn't want to put it up for adoption because they wouldn't want to know that something that's part of them is out in the world. Now, I don't think that's really a good excuse, but some people might think so. So, does that part weigh in at all? If there's a 3 month old that, based on their level of cognition and so on and so forth, if the mother that feels like she and the father that they can't afford to take care of the baby, but they also don't want the baby out in the world, it'll bring them this like torment from in their lives, knowing that something they created is out being raised by somebody else. Is that at all playing a factor in on if there was a family that would raise that baby and love that baby? Would you give those parents the right to terminate for that reason? Or is it just based on if the baby will have a good life?
I mean, it's based. Yeah, it would be based on like utility of both the parents and the baby, right? So,
Mm,
um, like if we just kind of step in a vacuum for a second, and we know that the suffering of the of the parents knowing that their bloodline is out there and that's causing them this torment, then it would be moral. As far as like legal goes, um, I don't know how we would. I don't think. I think more likely the well-being of the child existing in a good family is probably going to be higher than the suffering of like um the parents feeling sad about like their that bloodline going, yeah.
gotcha. Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, that was a good wild conversation. And yeah, and I'm curious to talk to you further on that topic of situations where legally in our realistic society where you would want police officers to be able to execute innocent people to save more. I think that would be an interesting thought experiment to like make a list and come up with cases where it would make sense. Yeah. I do got to hop off here, but I heard you talking about music in your last talk, and one of these days, me and you got to talk about music, whether it's on maybe just like not even recorded, but talk about music. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I heard you talking to, I can't remember her name, but somebody about Green Day, and you guys were going over your favorite albums. And I'm like, I want to be a part of this conversation.
I think it was Anna. Yeah.
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 But yeah. Cool, man. Well, you have a good 4th of July, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care.